I did not choose to love the way I love. No one ever explained to me that a mind designed for calculating orbital paths, building rockets, and rewriting the code of human civilization would also be the same mind that cannot fall asleep without someone beside it. No one warned me that the same obsessive focus that helped me build companies from almost nothing, the same relentless drive that pushed me through bankruptcy twice and brought me back stronger, would also be the exact trait that makes being alone feel like standing in a room without air. Yet that is where I am, and I think it is time I stop pretending that this isn't true. People look at my life and they see the companies. They see Tesla transforming the way the world drives. They see SpaceX landing rockets on floating drone ships in the middle of the ocean, like something out of the science fiction books I devoured as a child in Pretoria. They see Neuralink attempting to bridge the human brain with technology, Starlink, reshaping global communication, the boring company digging beneath cities, and a web of projects built by a mind that honestly does not know how to stop creating. But there is something they do not see, something I have never fully explained. Beneath every launch, every sleepless night, every impossible risk, every moment, when I stared at something that looked absurd and said, "Let's try anyway," there has always been a very simple truth driving me forward. I need someone to come home to. Not just want, need. I understand how that sounds coming from me. The world has built a very particular image of who I am. The cold billionaire, the unemotional strategist, the man who treats people like numbers inside a massive equation. I've read those descriptions. Some parts of them aren't entirely wrong, but what those descriptions fail to understand is that my mind never turns off. Not during meetings, not during flights across continents, not even at 3 in the morning when the house is quiet and my son is asleep, and there is nothing left between me and my own thoughts. My brain keeps running, constantly processing ideas, connecting patterns, constructing futures in real time. For years, I believed that constant motion was simply the cost of thinking this way. I thought the noise in my head was the unavoidable price of building things that didn't exist before. What I eventually realized much later than I should have is that when the right person is there, the noise changes. It doesn't disappear, but it shifts. It becomes less like pressure and more like direction, less like chaos and more like meaning. When that person isn't there, when the house is silent, and the night stretches too long, going to sleep alone hurts in a way that's hard to explain. I once said publicly that sleeping alone kills me. People assumed I was exaggerating. I wasn't. Isolation doesn't just affect me emotionally. It disrupts how my mind functions. I've said before that if I'm not in love, if I'm not sharing my life with someone who truly matters, I cannot be fully happy. That isn't weakness. That's simply how I'm wired. To understand why, you have to go back to the beginning. I grew up in Pretoria, South Africa, and by most standards, my childhood was difficult. My father was strict in ways that left deep marks. I was bullied badly enough at one point that I ended up in the hospital. I had very few friends. Most of my time was spent inside my own head, reading books, building imaginary worlds, treating stories like companions, because I didn't have many in real life. By the time I was 10 years old, I had read nearly every book in the school library. By 12, I was writing computer programs. By 14, I was already thinking about leaving South Africa, not running away from something, but moving toward a world where the ideas inside my head might actually matter. But here is something people rarely understand about growing up that isolated. The loneliness doesn't disappear when your circumstances change. It simply becomes quieter. It hides beneath achievement and success and opportunity. One day you wake up as an adult with resources you never imagined you would have, with influence, recognition, power, and the same empty feeling from being that child standing alone in the schoolyard is still waiting for you at the end of the day. That is why love affects me the way it does. When I meet someone whose mind genuinely connects with mine, it doesn't feel like a small addition to my life. It feels like gravity. I met Justine when we were students at Queen's University. She was a writer with a sharp mind and an attitude that was completely unimpressed by ambition. Most people around me were either intimidated or trying to impress me. She did neither. I showed up at the ice cream shop where she worked. I brought her cones, I pursued her the way I pursue everything directly, intensely, persistently, without always considering whether my intensity might be overwhelming. We married in 2000. I loved Justine deeply, but I entered that marriage without truly understanding what love required. To me, love meant devotion, intensity, complete presence, and expecting the same in return. What I hadn't learned yet was that love also requires space. The person you love has their own journey, unfolding beside yours. Sometimes those paths need room to grow independently. Then something happened that changes people forever. Our first son, Nevada, died at 10 weeks old. I rarely speak about this because there are no words that fully describe losing a child. Success cannot repair it. Achievement cannot erase it. The grief becomes permanent, a quiet shadow that follows you through the rest of your life. We eventually had 5 more children, twins, and triplets, but our marriage was under enormous strain. I was building companies that demanded every hour of my attention. She was raising children and holding our life together. Slowly, the distance between us grew. We divorced in 2008. Only months later, I met Talulah Riley. I proposed to her after 10 days. 10 days. I know how that sounds. It sounds reckless, but for me, it felt like recognition. My mind processes patterns quickly, and when something seems right, it moves fast. We married in 2010, divorced in 2012, married again in 2013, and divorced again in 2016. She once said I was the love of her life. She also said I had demons. Both statements can be true at the same time. Later came Amber Heard. When that relationship ended, I publicly admitted it caused me severe emotional pain. I meant that literally. Looking back, I realized that I often mistake intensity for permanence. When my feelings are strong, I assume they are a signal about the future. But strong emotion does not automatically create a stable foundation. Grimes was different. Our connection began through a joke about artificial intelligence and philosophy that almost no one else would find funny. She did. She builds worlds through music and imagination. I build machines. That contrast fascinated me. Our relationship was unconventional, complicated, and yet, for a long time, it worked in the ways that mattered. We have 3 children together, each of them extraordinary in their own way. I love them completely. That love isn't divided. It isn't measured. It is absolute. But I also have to be honest about something. I am not always the emotional partner people deserve. My biographer once said that I seem to have more empathy for humanity as a whole than for the 20 people closest to me. That observation isn't entirely wrong. I feel deeply, but translating that feeling into everyday life with someone beside me has not always been easy. I now have 14 children, 13 living, with 4 different women. My family is complicated. I will not pretend otherwise to make the story cleaner. What I can say without hesitation is that I love my children completely. My son X often comes with me to events because I want him to see the world from the inside. I want him to understand that the things his father builds are real, not abstract. Over time, I have begun to understand my own mind more clearly. I am wired for hyperfocus. I've spoken publicly about being on the autism spectrum. When my brain locks onto something, a problem, a mission, a company, or a person, it does not release easily. Neuroscience tells us that early romantic love activates the same dopamine systems involved in addiction. For most people, those chemical patterns stabilize over time. For minds like mine, the focus doesn't fade in the same way. When I truly love someone, that connection runs constantly in the background of my life. It is present beneath every meeting, every design decision, every launch. It is always there. That intensity can be beautiful. When I love someone, I see them deeply. I notice the small details, the patterns in their thinking, the things that excite them intellectually. But that same intensity can also be overwhelming. What I have been searching for my entire life is someone whose mind I cannot completely solve, someone with their own center of gravity, someone whose thinking surprises me, challenges me, and expands the world inside my head. The women I have loved most shared that quality. They were never defined by me. They carried their own strength. There is a public version of me the world knows well, the rockets, the tweets, the deadlines that seem impossible. That version is real, but underneath it there is still the boy from South Africa who spent hours alone in libraries reading books, because books didn't abandon you, and books couldn't hurt you. That boy grew into a man who builds companies the same way he once built imaginary worlds to quiet the noise inside his mind. And that man has always needed one person whose presence organizes the chaos, one person who can sit with the full weight of who I am and not walk away.
I once said that.
Love is the answer. People laughed because it sounded strange coming from someone obsessed with Mars and artificial intelligence. But I meant it. Truly. All the rockets, all the companies, all the achievements, they cannot fill the specific space that one right person fills. When that person is missing, the silence at the end of the day feels wrong. When they are there, even ordinary moments feel meaningful. I cannot love halfway. It isn't how I'm built, the same engine that drives me to build. Rockets also drives how I love. The same refusal to accept limits in technology exists in my heart. For years I thought that intensity was a flaw. Now I think it is simply the truth of who I am. And somewhere out there, I still believe there is someone strong enough to stand beside it. I did not choose to love the way I love. No one ever explained to me that a mind designed for calculating orbital paths, building rockets, and rewriting the code of human civilization would also be the same mind that cannot fall asleep without someone beside it. No one warned me that the same obsessive focus that helped me build companies from almost nothing, the same relentless drive that pushed me through bankruptcy twice and brought me back stronger, would also be the exact trait that makes being alone feel like standing in a room without air. Yet that is where I am, and I think it is time I stop pretending that this isn't true. People look at my life and they see the companies. They see Tesla transforming the way the world drives. They see SpaceX landing rockets on floating drone ships in the middle of the ocean, like something out of the science fiction books I devoured as a child in Pretoria. They see Neuralink attempting to bridge the human brain with technology, Starlink, reshaping global communication, the boring company digging beneath cities, and a web of projects built by a mind that honestly does not know how to stop creating. But there is something they do not see, something I have never fully explained. Beneath every launch, every sleepless night, every impossible risk, every moment, when I stared at something that looked absurd and said, let's try anyway, there has always been a very simple truth driving me forward. I need someone to come home to. Not just need. I understand how that sounds coming from me. The world has built a very particular image of who I am. The cold